Michael, are we ready then?
We are ready to go.
Okay, I'd like to call a regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to order. It's 8 o'clock, and Michael, do you have some announcements?
I do. This meeting is being fed live over the internet, and the public can view the meeting by going to our website, www.kmpud.com, and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make any comment, they may send an email to msharp@kmpud.com, and the board will respond as time allows. Both Director Endy will be participating via teleconference. Due to this, all voting must be done by roll call, and board members must identify themselves when speaking. So welcome and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peter, would you like to do the roll call?
Sure. Endy?
Here. Endy here.
Rickard?
Here.
Epstein?
Epstein here.
Dornbrick here. O'Grady absent.
Okay. The next item is oral communications. If there's any member of the public that wants to bring something to the board on a non-agenda related item, you're welcome to do so at this time. Okay, seeing Cheryl shaking her head, we'll consider that complete. Let me next ask if there's any corrections or to the consent calendar or the agenda. Peter? Bob, Andy, any?
No, sir.
Okay. Would someone like to move the adoption of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Dornbrick, aye.
Oh,
Or, Dornbrick
moved.
second.
Dornbrick second. Okay, we'll take roll call on it. Rickard?
Aye.
Okay. Bob, Andy?
Endy, aye.
Okay. Peter?
Dornbrick, aye.
Okay, and Epstein, aye, so the consent calendar passes. We'll now bring items forward for discussion, and the first item is 8A, discussion and possible action regarding the design timeline, bidding process, costs, and construction activities associated with the Out Valley project. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. I'll be giving the Out Valley update today as both Michelle and Dave are taking a well-deserved day off. It was a very busy week with the clearances this week, so we decided that they needed the weekend on and regroup for next week. I'll start with the underground. KMPUD has completed the conduit installation from the beginning of the underground all the way to the east side of the Silver Lake Bridge. 29,000 feet of conduit has already been laid this year, with about 23,000 feet left to go. Left to be installed is the conduit from Silver Lake Bridge to Kirkwood, which is a demanding area, but well doable. The district is in discussions with Caltrans on the installation of the conduit along the snow pole line without endangering future snow pole installations, pounding the snow pole into the cable. We're working with on a solution of using a stronger mix of slurry rather than the 3,000 psi, a stronger mix of slurry, so that it would actually inhibit the pounding of the pole into the slurry, and also marking the poles with a piece of tape that it would actually indicate the depth that they should be pounded into. They don't use just a hammer; they use a pneumatic hammer or a backhoe. So this would give them an indication of how deep the pole should go. Plus, the slurry would inhibit the pole from going any deeper and endangering the workers. We feel that we have reached a compromise with Caltrans, and this will be resolved early next week.
Well, what happened to the plan before this? I mean, what?
Well, we have an approved design of going, right there in the snow pole line, and then the maintenance workers brought up this issue of the snow pole. So we have an approved design. We're actually going with the approved design, except with a thicker, stronger, I should call, slurry mix. And then the taping of the snow pole line, which would actually be a Caltrans issue.
How much of the line is actually in the snow pole corridor?
We've only got 5 miles to go. And a lot of that, if you know the spurs, I know you do, Peter, a lot of that is in the road. there's just no shoulder. It just breaks off. So I would guess half.
About half of it's, okay.
I would say half is probably in that shoulder, and then the other half is probably in the pavement itself.
They wouldn't consider doing what we do here in the valley where they leave the snow poles up?
They do.
Well, they still do, but they still have to pound replacement.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So they do exactly what we do in the valley. So when you drive, you'll notice there's snow poles all over. But when they get damaged, they have to reinstall, and they just have to,
So that makes the odds a little better.
right.
Okay.
And they have a legitimate concern about their employees.
Sure.
Bear River Road has been repaved, and we are actually buttoned up all the way from the end of the Out Valley line all the way up Bear River Road. We have some minor regrading to do along the edge, but it's been repaved and it looks really good. Amador County is very pleased with the work down there. Near Oyster Creek, crews have encountered a Caltrans French drain, which was not on any plans. We had to turn trucks away full of slurry, we had to repair the French drain, and we had to move the trench and resaw cut about 190 feet of paving in order to be able to continue with the installation. This was very expensive. We lost about a day of work during this. We have been advised by Caltrans that we can file a claim to recover our losses, since this was not marked as far as a USA, and our entire line, of course, was marked as USA. So unknown utility, that's one of the laws that govern that. Titan Electric will be back on site on June 23rd, pulling cable. They've been here before. They caught up with Q&D, because trenching takes a lot longer than pulling the cable. Titan is our electrical contractor for the underground. Process very smooth so far, with about 18,700 feet of cable pulled through conduit this year. So they're pulling the conduit, they're terminating it, building the elbows for the sectionalizing cabinet. That's a sectionalizing cabinet that you see right there. And you can see the cable showing, and they're working on building the elbows at that point. 8 vaults have been set, 7 are remaining, and 16 sectionalizing cabinets have been set, with 17 remaining to be set. So there's a crew that's working behind the trenchers. They set the vaults and the sectionalizing cabinets, and then on the 23rd, Titan will come in and pull the cable to the lines and connect us all up. And then after all that, then another crew will come through and do the revegetation. So last year they did the minor revegetation that's needed to get us through the winter season. This year they'll actually spend the time to do the actual revegetation that's called for in the EIR. The overhead is making also making good progress, and is actually a bit ahead of schedule. On the 115, Crux, who is a subcontractor for Wilson Construction, has completed all of the micropile installations and have actually demobilized and left the site. Through June 10th through 20th is our major clearance, which is a power outage, and the 115 kV poles are being flown in. As of Friday, all 21 poles, all 21 of the 115 poles have been set. So as of yesterday, all of our poles are set on the 115, and over the weekend, Wilson hopes to pull the sock lines and the cable right after it, and we'll have cable from Salt Springs to Cam Green. So that's
amazing.
Yeah.
that's
That's
where
a
we wanted to
Stevens
be on
project,
August
yeah.
15th. So we're extremely pleased. Crux did a great job in getting the micropile foundations in. I have a video that I'll show after the meeting showing a tower, one of these large towers being installed on a steep hill. incredible. For the 34-5 line, Outback has completed all of the reinforced concrete pier foundations. 5 of the direct pier foundations have been excavated, and 10 of the 37 structures have been set. Here's a few pictures showing the drilling of the direct embeds. And here's the standing of a pole. With the 34-5, we don't have to fly in the poles. We only had to fly in a couple of the poles on the steep sections, which was luckily enough outside the LOP area. So we don't have to fly any more poles now. We're done flying poles. We do have to fly the sock lines and the cable installation. So there's still sock line and cable installation that have to be flown in even after this clearance. Morning, Jay. And you can see them, these are pictures of them standing a pole. They have vehicular access to the site so they can stand them using this equipment. Here's some pictures of them flying in the 115 kV poles. And here are the huge helicopters that they're using, which are much different from the helicopters they used during the initial installation. This is near Bear River. That's the staging area with all the poles lined up.
Michael, are these photographs in the box folder? Or?
Yes, they're the same ones that are in the box holder. That's actually a person on the end of a line. And we did want to show you this picture that he safely makes it to the pole, just in case. Pretty dramatic country down there, but I would think that the major work of getting the poles installed, and hopefully this weekend we'll have the sock lines up that steep slope, will be complete, and that's a major completion, and we're very pleased that we've gotten to that stage. The overhead is still shooting for a September completion date, or sooner, depending on the LOP restrictions, which I'll get into shortly. The clearance of the 12 kV line was very expensive. The cost was $120,000 for the entire project. This is for the entire outage period, and was unanticipated. There'll be 2 outage periods, the one that we're currently in, and then there'll be a period of outage which will be much shorter when we fly in the sock line and the 34K line for the 34K area. PG&E, through previous discussions, were to allow these outages without generation. However, PG&E had a change in direction and policy, and they subsequently required 24-hour generation. We had to rent 3 generators as shown, and an on-site technician who had to be there on-site to make sure that they filled them up and that there was no problems during it. So this is a picture of the generators and the trailer that was needed. Both substations are under construction. KM Blue, the above shows the conduits that were previously run during the powerhouse construction from the dirt room to the switchgear. So we found those. We had run 8 conduits. We actually only need, I think, 6 of them. But this is inside the dirt room, and a large vault will be placed over these. Those new lines tied in, one set going, of course, to the switchgear, the other set going to the transformer and to the new reaction and switchgear for the out valley. Here's the transformer being padded up. This is the transformer pad, which is outside of the dirt room, and it's been complete and it looks great, and there it is right there. This is the finished pad, and the transformer is to arrive on Monday. Inside the dirt room, they're forming up with the rebar for the pad inside the dirt room and all the conduits that are associated, and this pad has also been poured. KM Green substation, you'll recognize this. It's working on the construction. The biggest piece of construction right now is the installation of the pier foundations for the steel structures that will be in. Remember that on either side of the substation, the wire actually comes in, and we have steel structures that accept the wire. We have switches and such. This is pretty major pieces of steel, and these are the foundations that it's going to sit on in construction. 70 10-foot grounding rods will have to be installed under the equipment for protection. Rock has been encountered, so Outback, who is another subcontractor of Wilson Construction, has had to bring in a larger rock drill, which looks like that. So overall, the substation construction is on schedule, and we're looking for a September completion. So for this construction portion of it, I'll break here if there's any questions that you might have.
I guess we should expect it, but it all seems slightly miraculous.
Yeah, it sure does.
It really
Things are going
does.
well.
Just amazing.
Yeah, good. All right, thank you. So that completes item 8A. We'll move on to item 8B, or is there more in 8A? Okay.
So the LOP, this is the limiting operating area for the spotted owl that were encountered in certain areas of the 34K. And we've had a meeting with Lawrence Crabtree, the El Dorado National Forest Supervisor, stressing the importance of getting a relief on the spotted owl so that we continue. Right now, the spotted owl period ends on August 15th. They have lifted the spotted owl restrictions for a period of time between for holes 1 through 8 and 30 through 36. So we've been very 37. So we've been very fortunate, and the Forest Service has worked with us well, but not being able to enter into the corridor from 8 to 30 really puts us in the construction during the middle of the hottest part of the season, where we could have potential forest fires, etc. So the Forest Service has worked with us, and they're allowing the district to complete the owl survey, which in the past they wanted to complete the survey themselves, but they didn't have the resources to do so, so we were in kind of a catch-22. But their Forest Service supervisor has agreed to this, and we actually got on the ball and got this done this last week. On Monday, they did callings, they didn't find anything, and then on Tuesday through Friday, they actually went tree to tree within a quarter-mile buffer of the affected section, which is right here, right in the middle of this yellow line here, which is the 34K restricted area. With these results, we hope the Forest Service to make a decision on lifting of the balance of this LOP next week. However, on Friday, they found a male owl.
Was he lonely?
Excuse me?
Was he lonely?
Yes, actually, we do. We're in the process of determining the impact, but he wasn't calling. The owl wasn't calling. There's no female been present, and he's not feeding. He's not feeding on mice that they've released to try to get him to feed. These are all indications that this is a bachelor, an old grumpy bachelor owl. And if that's the case, the LOP could still be lifted. It's a mating season issue that they're talking about. So it's the female owl and the mating and the couple that they're really interested in. So we'll know the results of this early next week. If they do find that it's mating, or they have a suspicion, and this is all Forest Service decision, then that would create a buffer around that tree, and it would impact our constructability for holes 9 through 19. We have a very good possibility of opening up holes 20 through 30. So it would give us half as much as we actually wanted, and with the possibility of getting the whole thing opened up. Keep your fingers crossed that it's an old grumpy bachelor. We're also working with the Forest Service on the fire restriction and what can be done on specific weather condition days. This is called the PAL system.
Mike, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just curious, was the owl found in a place, I mean, I know we had thought that some of the areas just weren't likely to have owls at all. Was this found in one of those areas, or an area where, in fact, it'd be perfectly normal to find an owl?
The Forest Service lifted the restrictions on areas that we didn't think
Okay.
would have. That was the 37 through 30. As you're looking up from the road, you look up and it looks like no owl's going to live there. There's no trees. They lifted all that. This is under the dense coverage in between the substation and that ridge line, if you remember that.
Yeah, okay, good, thanks.
It was about 200 feet off of pole number 14 in a pretty dense area. So we are working with the Forest Service on the activities that can happen in during certain weather conditions. This is called a POW program. There's restrictions on the activities which can be performed due to windy conditions, heat conditions, those type, and they rate those B, C, D, E, and EV. We have secured variances so that we can continue working without, we can't do during higher fire danger days, which are basically windy, hot days. We can't do chainsaw work, we can't do welding work, we can't use tracked vehicles in the forest, that kind of things, but pretty much everything else we can do. We do need to follow fire safe practices. We have water tenders on site, we have Pulaskis on site, fire extinguishers, and we pre-soak areas before we work on them. So we are doing fire safe activities. So overall out valley construction, if we get the LOP lifted and we have some favorable weather, we could be out of the national forest except for the substations by August 15th. And that would be spectacular. As far as the finances go, on June 3rd, the B8 loan received admin approval through RUS. So congratulations. It's a huge relief. We have received approval for the B8 loan. Working hard to produce the loan documents with Foster Grant and Foster Pepper and Jones Hall. For 3 weeks, we'll be working with Russ and Foster Pepper on getting our loan documents approved, or loan documents themselves approved. Then they'll come before the board for approval, and then back to Russ, which will take about 3 weeks for approval. The funds, which is $8 million, should be available in August. I wanted to warn the board that this time is critical, and we may need a special meeting of the board for this one document approval sometime in late June. But I'll keep you apprised of that. If everything goes right, we'll need a special meeting. If not, we can do it at the July meeting. The district recently drew $7 million of the remaining $11 million of the A8 loan, the original loan, at around 3.25% interest. We're working with Randy Finken and the Finance Committee on terms and draws dates for the remaining $4 million in the A8 funds. This chart here,
Michael, let me just interrupt for a second. So Bob, we're on page 45 of the handouts.
thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
This chart shows the draws to date and the interest rates that have been corresponding. The board approved the tranche schedule shown in your packet. The Finance Committee may want to revise when we take down draws based on conversations with PG&E and current interest rates. We would like the consensus of the board to allow staff to work with the Finance Committee to nail down the details for the next $4 million in draws scheduled for early July. And I would like a consensus of the board that that direction makes sense. Staff would still confer with the board president or treasurer on the interest rate right before actually taking the draw.
Sure, I mean, I think that's perfectly appropriate.
I'm good with that.
Okay, and Bob, Andy?
you're on page 45, I'm trying to get linked up to that.
I think it's-
This is on the revised
No,
version of the board packet that's in the box.
no, I'm sorry, that's the board presentation file. If you were following that had the pictures and things.
Yeah, I was looking at the pictures, yeah.
Okay, so on the slide 45 of that file.
Okay, got you, thank you.
Okay, sorry for the confusion. All right, so it's the consensus of the board to, Mike will work with the finance and determine the actual draws for the remaining portion.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
As far as, we're also working with RUS and District Consultant Bob Benson on the depreciation schedule. We've been successful in reducing the distribution plant depreciation from 2.83% to 1.62%. Now we're working on reducing the powerhouse depreciation once it goes into standby mode. Currently, it's at 7%, and we'd like to see that reduced to possibly 5 to even 3.5%, or reduce that by half. This just makes sense because at 7%, they're thinking that it's going to last this long in prime power position, while we're going to go into standby, it should last much longer, thereby the plant will last much longer. We should be able to depreciate it for a much longer period. This has a significant impact on the amount of depreciation that we have to fund annually, from $840,000 down to $420,000. We are working with Exponential for a proposal for them to do a useful life analysis on the powerhouse, and we should be bringing that back before the board on the July meeting for approval, so that we can do a useful life and have something to point at to say, you know, it's going to last this long, we should be able to depreciate it for a longer period.
And that's about 5-cent difference per kilowatt hour in rates, if I remember correctly.
Is it that big?
Yeah,
Huge impact.
yeah, because you have a $14 million power plant
Right.
that would be depreciated at half the current rate. The current depreciation assumes the engines will have to be replaced in 14 years, or actually 12 years from now, which seems very unlikely if all they are is standby.
Not only that, it assumes that the entire powerhouse would have to be replaced. And
Right.
Oh,
the
right.
structure, the switchgear, the fans, lights, motors. So
Yeah, so I got your attention.
Yeah, 5 cents
Okay.
gets my attention. A nickel will always get my attention.
Good.
Bob, that concludes my Out Valley update.
Okay. So we're ready to move on to 8B then on the agenda. Discussion and possible approval of change order from Distran related to the cost of the steel for KM Green, totaling $29,145 due to a design change. So Michael, I'll turn it back to you.
In order to meet timelines, KM Green Steel went out to bid and was awarded prior to the designs for all the items which actually will be hung on the device. The switchgear was received. Once the designs for the switchgear was received, it was found that they could not use diagonal bracing. So here is the steel that will hold the lines as they come into KM Green. And this is the 34K, it's a square structure here. And it was hoped that we could use diagonal bracing in order to beef this up. But because of the location of the switchgear, this steel had to be increased in size and weight. It had to go up by 14,000 pounds because the switchgear wouldn't allow the installation of diagonal bracing. The cost increase to the project is $29,145, and staff is looking for board approval of this change order for that amount.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I assume there really are no alternatives.
No, I don't see any alternatives.
I'm prepared to move to accept the change order.
Okay. Is there a second?
That was Dora.
Yeah, sorry.
Rickard seconds.
Okay, so do a roll call on it. Rickard?
Rickard, aye.
Andy?
NDI.
Okay, Dornbrook?
Norbert, aye?
And Epstein, aye. Okay, so we've approved the change order. So item 8C, we're ready for that. Continued discussion and possible action regarding the current PG&E cost estimates and impact to the overall finances and drawdown schedule in relationship to the district's Out Valley Power Project. And on, Bob, we're on slide 47 in the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Board members Bob Epstein, Standish O'Grady, consultants, and I have been in negotiations with PG&E. We actually had a meeting on May 29th and then have had many subsequent discussions. The discussions have centered around, and the most important issue is the ownership of the 115 kV line. This has a huge impact, the 115 kV poles and line. Originally, we were going to deed that over to PG&E and they would assume ownership and maintenance responsibilities. But since we've had cost overruns by PG&E and by the contract for Wilson Construction for the 1 kV was so much higher, the cost for their maintenance and their ITCC tax is incredible. The impact of deeding over the $7.5 million needed to build this 1.3 miles of 115 line would be 34% in ITCC taxes would have to be paid. This amounts to somewhere around $2.5 million in ITCC taxes. The cost of ownership, which is a percentage of that amount, would be reduced if we did not have to deed this over down by $383,000 annually. We've also had negotiations with regards to the cost of ownership, the calculation of the capital cost, whether soft costs would need to be included, which the board has discussed. Also talking about the 12 kV line, whether cost of ownership or ITCC taxes would need to be paid on an existing line that they currently have and we're just upgrading. We've also talked about the existing cost overruns by PG&E, which total $1.2 million. Future cost overruns that they forecasted, which are now down to $200,000, and the cost of a facility study. So at this time, our current, we have written a letter to PG&E outlining the district's understanding and that we have reached tentative verbal agreement that we will be able to retain ownership of the 115 line. But we will be responsible for their cost overruns. So this is huge. We have written a letter confirming this. We've had a conversation with Bob Daniels. He has verbally agreed to this. We're looking for PG&E to put it into writing and to commit the resources needed to change the interconnection agreement in order for us to get this done in a reasonable time frame. Question?
Is there some simple way to describe the impact of that? You know, the way Bob just said, that would be 5 cents a kilowatt hour.
It's about 8 cents savings per kilowatt hour.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's a while. That nets off both the pluses and the minuses that you described, Michael. The cost overages on one side and everything else on the other side.
That's the net result. That's not just the
Yes.
benefit. It's also
That-
recognizing that we pay the 1.2 or 1.4 million of overrun.
That's right. That would be the net benefit of this structure over the current structure, assuming we couldn't change anything else. And then the amount of cash that we no longer have to put in is somewhere close to $4 million, I believe.
exactly, and we'll get that on the budget.
Right.
So the
So yes, even though we're not jumping up and down, in fact we are.
Yeah.
inside, I'm just doing
well,
dances right now.
I know that's the case. Is, in your mind, Michael, is there any risk that since this is not nailed down officially yet, that PG&E will reverse field in any fashion?
Yeah. Absolutely.
There is risk, yeah. There's always risk, I guess.
Yes, in discussions with them, we may agree to something one day and the next day they say that they've revised their position. So at the moment, I think we'll take it at face value that we're going. That's the reason why we wrote a letter to to clarify it and asking for them to confirm the understanding and direction. And we haven't, but we'll see what, I suspect we'll be fine at this point.
Thanks. Congratulations as well.
Yeah,
And
don't
thanks
jinx it.
to Directors Epstein and Standish O'Grady for taking the time to go to the meeting. Though the meeting was only a C-, but subsequent, it was...
Oh, that was Standish's grade. Oh, no, is that my grade or Standish?
That was your-
Yeah, that's right.
Standish had a great...
He had he's a harder grader.
Yeah,
So the next steps is for the negotiating team is actually Bob Daniels from PG&E and myself. What we hope to do is get the IA revised and work through the issues and then have a confirmation meeting or to work out further, difficulties or details at a July 11th meeting where the board members would actually be present.
On the ITCC, I know there was a chance that Congress would extend the legislation that I think keeps it at 22%. Is there an update on that?
We know that it passed the Finance Committee, and it may have passed through the Senate, because there was a major bill that just went through. We asked for Jim Boyd, our consultant, for that question. If it did pass the Senate, then it's going to be, of course, going to the House next. So, as far as I know, it's still in the works, and that's the bonus depreciation. This does not mean that the district, there is an issue that the district will own the 115 line, and we will have increased maintenance and liability exposure. We are working on an RFP for outside maintenance help on all aspects of the Out Valley project. We had to do this anyway. We have a 34 line that we're going to own. We have 26 miles of underground that we're going to own. So we're going out for an RFP to get assistance, technical assistance for the underground, overhead, and substations. This is mostly for who you're going to call. This is mostly for when a problem happens, what is our resources? There will be visual inspections by staff, and there will be maintenance requirements by these outside services, but this is mostly for the assurance that we can do something in case of an emergency, and that they have the resources, snowcats, helicopters, whatever it might be, in order to perform whatever duties that are in our Northern California Joint Pole Association contract. So that will be coming back before the board. Our hopes is to get that done in mid-September, if not by mid-September would be excellent. October 1st would be okay, because that outside service has to come to the substations and actually view the gear. They have to actually come out on site and say, okay, I can throw that breaker or do whatever. So.
And in interest of completeness, since PG&E also has a 12K line on the same pole, they'd be looking to us. We'd be providing maintenance to them.
Really?
The pole that's standing, we're responsible for. So if anything happened, we would have to meet their requirements as well. But we're saving $380,000 a year. So if we can maintain that for less than $380,000 a year, which we obviously, I think we can, then we're still way ahead.
Is Russ
Are
going
we
to
going to charge them for the O&M of the line that they're putting on our poles?
That's, there are joint pole...
Probably not the right time to discuss this, right?
It's a good question, Bob.
There is joint ownership of lines on poles throughout the United States. In fact, we were going to have that with the 34K line anyway. The 12KB was always going to remain in PG&E's control. This is just an additional. So what they do, to answer questions like Bob's, is that they formed an association called the Northern California Joint Pole Association, and it sets forth the maintenance responsibilities of each of the parties that share these lines. And we'll be working under those guidelines. Typically, the guy that's on top has to fix it first, and then the guy on the bottom has to fix second because of safety issues. But we'll be working under those guidelines and bringing back more information as we learn more. my report on 8C.
Okay. We'll move on to 8D next, which is a public hearing. Public hearing, take input and discuss the proposed adjustments for propane rates and electric service charges. And we'll start with Michael, then get board comments, and then open it up for public input.
As discussed at the last meeting, the current budget calls for, and our financial forecast prepared by Howard Barnes calls for a 3.5% increase in electric rates and an 8.5% decrease in propane rates. Electric rates would be overall, propane rates would be on the variable portion. The electric rate increase is due to we are in the 2014-15 year is an odd year for the district. We not only have the ongoing expenses for the powerhouse and the diesel associated for the first 4 months of operation, July through November, but we'll also have the startup costs for the Out Valley project, costs of buying power off the national grid, and PG&E O&M costs, which are brand new to us, and unknown maintenance costs, which is a key factor. We don't know how much diesel we'll actually need during the November 1st through July 1st period to actually operate the generators in a maintenance standby mode. We anticipate it's about 15% of the normal load, but we don't know. That could be way high, that could be low. I anticipate that that's high, but we just don't know how much maintenance we're going to have to perform on the powerhouse to keep it in prime condition so we have a redundant electric supply. For propane, we're forecasting an 8.5% decrease because our operating expenses have been reduced. One of the things is that our new meters don't require manual reading, and that has reduced our costs. We can do it by radio from our desks. Also, our costs are just less than anticipated. The last 2 years, and we had a 2-year period so we could prove this out, our operating costs are less than we thought. So if the board so approves, the electric variable rate would go from 0.5437 to 0.5628 cents per kilowatt hour, and the base would go from 20.67 to 21.39 on a monthly basis. The propane variable portion would go from 0.0915 to 0.075 per cubic foot. And it should be noted that in our 5-year budget, which we'll be presenting shortly, we do show electric rate decreases next year in the following budget. So staff recommends approval of ordinance 1414, adjusting the rates as described.
Can we open up for board
Michael,
comment?
can you run the electric cost by me again? You threw me off there by starting off with a 0.5 something number, and I had to catch up. You realize you were talking about cents.
Yeah, so it would be 0.5437, which is the current rate, to 0.5628.
Okay, thank you.
So the only question I have about this, I think that the increases are and decreases are appropriate, but it's section 6 of the resolution, the automatic adjustments for inflation is, and I brought this up before. I don't think the resolution makes clear, maybe it's not intended as I'm going to say it, but since we adjust for diesel cost anyway, and since we adjust for propane cost anyway, and since depreciation is a fixed cost, not a variable cost, I want to be sure, or at least I'd like to propose that the annual increase for inflation does not increase, that stuff is taken out of the base so that the increase would actually be smaller. So in other words, if half of our costs, roughly, are diesel, we adjust for that anyway, so we shouldn't be increasing the 56 point whatever cents by the full amount by 1 or 2% a year for inflation. I'm not sure I've very clear here.
No, no, no,
There's
you've made this
a certain
point.
amount of costs that we adjust, that are either fixed and don't adjust but for inflation, or we adjust anyway on a monthly basis.
Yeah, when we do a rate increase, it's not taking into account the diesel portion of the variable rate, if that makes sense. And you've brought that out, and we
Yeah.
don't, yeah. So the 25 cents that we originally budgeted is still at 25 cents, because we make it up in a fuel adjustment, either negative or
Right.
positive. It's always positive, because it's never 25 cents or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
the propane's been negative, that's why we've been seeing credits
Exactly.
on that.
Right, but we don't increase that portion of the variable rate.
And then the other is, and maybe this is more for the future, when depreciation is a very large amount for the outgoing. Depreciation is a fixed thing as well. So, right, I mean, it doesn't vary by CPI. So it may be appropriate at some point to make sure that that's not included either. That the only thing that's increasing because of inflation are labor costs, O&M costs, those kinds of things.
Okay, other board comments?
No.
Okay, so let me now open up for members of the public to comment on the proposed rate changes. Okay, so I just want to also, so there aren't any? Okay, it could be a very short public hearing. Please. And please just introduce yourself and then speak up so Bob can hear you.
My name is Doug Robinson. I've owned a home here for 20 years, but I just moved here in the last year, so I'm catching up a little bit on what's going on. And this may be naive or even out of place, but I wonder if you could simply explain to me why we're doing the Out Valley project.
I assume that wasn't a yes or no question, but you'd like the explanation, so who would like?
Yes, please.
We're happy to do that. Who would like to? I'd be happy to start and then have other people join in. It's a great question.
And this is in the context of the
Yes.
high utility costs that we already have and
Right.
the possibility of raising them today.
Right. So we did an analysis, which is still available on the web, which we can, identify for you, of looking at over the next 30 years, assuming a low-end growth within the valley according to the specific plan, what the cost of electricity might be under either the Out Valley project or diesel. And we had determined that it's highly likely that it would be less expensive with Out Valley than depending on diesel. So that's one factor. The second factor is environmental. That because the state of California, imposes fees on greenhouse gas emissions, the emissions from diesel are the most polluting in terms of greenhouse gas over anything. It's about 3 times the rate, just given the current grid, what we can buy, et cetera. We also have to switch to renewables as required by law, and we also want to. We have very limited choice of what to do if we stay on diesel. There isn't any renewable. There's almost no renewable diesel we could afford or could get delivered here as an alternative. So there's environmental factors. There's price factors for which we will ultimately end up saving money according to our analysis. And then the third factor is just plain reliability. With the system that we're proposing, we have 100% backup. We have 2 sources of power. We have the grid and we have a completely redundant power system. So the ability to be reliable is much higher. And in terms of maintaining, having growth in the valley, having the ski resort have good quality operations, that's kind of the key. So those are the three major factors. The disadvantage of it is that in our loan covenants, we're required to capture revenues of 105%. So we actually have to charge 5% more than our actual costs. But that accumulates cash. We then use that cash to pay down the debt. So we're going to have a peak expense here over the next 12 months, and then after that, we can start to lower rates as we start to pay down the loan. And then the major factor in terms of rates is really whether there's growth in the valley or not. we have to have an infrastructure to accommodate everything, and the infrastructure we have in place accommodates the full growth. As the growth happens, there's more people to pay for it, and rates go down. If the snowpack disappears, that's going to be a hard thing to accomplish. So I think at this point, the major risk we have is the weather. If anyone
No,
wants
I think
to add
that's
to that
I
summary.
think that's a really good explanation. I'll just add that there were many, many public discussions about this. I mean, this has been considered for many, many years, and then it became actively considered starting maybe in 2005 or 2006. Then we had many public discussions about it that became more and more specific, more and more analytical. This gentleman, Howard Barnes, once we had the Russ loan, which is the source of our low interest rate loans, we're around 3%. A gentleman named Howard Barnes provided us with very detailed financial analyses, and it was in September of 2012 that we finally had our best estimate of cost and our best estimate of rates and our best estimates of consumption and growth and so on. And that forecast at that time a peak rate, which would be happening starting next year, of about 65 cents a kilowatt hour, and then declining from there over a long period of time. And the rate at which it declines kind of accelerates over time. And it was quite a public hearing, and it was nearly uniformly, not completely, but nearly uniformly supported that we should go ahead with the project. So for me, that 65 cents is magic. And I know we've been creeping up from there because of these overruns, so that's why that 5 cents is so interesting to me, because I think that gets us back down into that territory. I mean, to me, that was a commitment to the public, that we're going into this project and peaking out at 65 cents.
Right. And let me just add, the 65 cents is taking all costs into consideration. It adds in the base rate.
The base rate.
To determine it, which is why the numbers look different than what's here.
Yeah.
Right now, for us our incremental cost of generating a kilowatt hour are 28 cents approximately. That's the cost for diesel fuel to generate a kilowatt hour. Now we have line losses and the rest of that, so we don't actually sell the full kilowatt. We lose a portion of it. Buying from the grid is about 6 cents. 6, right. Instead of 28. So what happens is, assuming diesel stays where it currently is at about $3.80 a gallon, then we save 22 cents a kilowatt hour, but against that we borrow a lot of money, and we have depreciation, which diminishes over time. But that's the trade-off. The unknown is, what do you think diesel prices will be in 10 years? So oil traded at $107 a barrel on Friday.
Yeah.
Will it be $50 a barrel in 10 years, or 200, or the same? What's happened during the course of the project, oil has sort of swung between $90 and $107. Meanwhile, natural gas prices have dropped. But none of us are smart enough to tell you what that'll look like in 10 years. But we're hedging our bets toward a grid-based approach for having the lowest cost of power. And we hope, hope is not a strategy, but we think the combination of all those things and the availability of low-cost loans, we're getting our money on the order of around 3% interest rate. And that's what made the whole thing possible. But it's a great question. I'm glad you asked.
May I clarify one part then?
Yeah.
Because you framed the discussion in terms of the diesel powerhouse versus the grid.
Right.
And I understand the air quality problems and love the fact that we're getting away from those because they're awful.
Yeah.
But I wonder additionally if serious consideration was given to alternative energy sources such as solar, which the cost of which is dropping radically as we speak.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can answer that, prior to my coming onto the board, matter of fact, how I got interested in being on the board, was I was asking that same question. I and a variety of other people were asking that question. What would be the possibilities of alternative sources of energy generated within the valley without being connected to the grid?
Right.
And we looked at solar, we looked at wind, we looked at microturbines, we looked at fuel cells. At one point, natural gas generation was discussed. And the constraints that we have are space. I mean, wind and solar of any scale require a lot of space. And we are surrounded by various grades of wilderness as defined by the United States Forest Service. And those various grades of wilderness prohibit visual impacts of human-made structures. So the size of wind, the 100-foot tall wind turbines, or the, if I remember my data right, the 10 acres of solar fields just to generate a fraction of what we really need just became, untenable. In discussions with the Forest Service, it just didn't seem at all promising to us. And the other technologies like the microturbines and so on all run into problems at high elevation. So anyway, in the end, I still think that it might be feasible in the end to generate 10% of our power through those sources, maybe 15% if we were really lucky. Oh, we also looked at hydro, micro hydro. We looked at could we convert our wastewater treatment plant to produce methane, all those things. And nothing seems straightforward or very feasible in any scale.
So the Forest Service frowned on the idea of 10 acres of solar panels?
Yes, the visual impacts from the areas that are deemed, I can't remember, they have different gradations of wilderness.
Right.
And different visual impacts allowed. Like,
So we don't have high-grade wilderness within visual sight of the south-facing hillsides, do we? I'm just trying to understand. It seems ironic.
well, for example, one thing that was fairly seriously looked at even by the old owners of the resort were wind turbines along that ridge, above Emigrant, above Caples and so on. But that is a higher grade wilderness area back in there. So
Right.
the visual impacts, of, I think the minimum height of the turbines would be 75 feet or something like that, but you need a whole series of them.
Well, 1 megawatt turbine normally has a 300-foot wingspan, so it's much higher than that. Normally for wind to pencil out, you need average winds of 18 knots, or 18 miles per hour over the year, and I don't believe the wind resources here fit that very well.
Well, at lower elevations, like down
Yeah.
in the valley, it doesn't,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. But the other thing we ran into, this is going on too long, because I spent a lot of time on this. I had a guy come in, a manufacturer of wind turbines, who claimed that, in fact, it could withstand the high winds on the ridges up here, which have been clocked at 200 miles an hour.
Right.
But most wind turbines can't take that.
Right.
So, anyway, lots and
Yeah.
lots and lots and lots of challenges, which would make the whole situation very, very iffy and basically not feasible, other than small-scale solar on appropriately oriented and designed roofs and so on.
I would like to comment that I did get a proposal for building solar roof over this parking lot, and so it would be above it, the cars would be below. And if we stayed with diesel, it would pencil out. If we go with the grid, it's way too expensive, and the cheaper way to do solar is to put it in the Central Valley and use the transmission lines to bring the power.
Right.
logically, conceptually bring the power here. So by connecting to the grid, we can put if we want to own renewable resources, instead of just purchasing renewable power, we could do it anywhere we want. Anywhere there's transmission, we could actually build a plant, and that would offset our usage. So the renewables are easier to do if you're connected to the grid. And our 3 solar residences will tell you how hard it was to integrate with diesel and make it actually offset the diesel itself, which is what you really want to do. So in a small setting like this, the renewables don't work nearly as well as we would have available in a connected grid environment. And then there's the fact that solar is going to produce most of its power in the middle of the summer when we have almost no demand. We would then want to export it,
Which requires the
which
connection.
requires a 2-way connection instead of a 1-way, which was going to add 7 digits to the project. So we looked at it, and
We looked at, how can we store electricity if we generate it with wind at night? How can we store it? We looked at flywheels and
none of us felt.
compression.
I don't think any of us felt we could take the financial risk and put it on the community
Right.
at 8,000 feet with 800 inches of snow. You're doing great, though. I want to know your next question. These are very, very good questions, and I'm glad you're asking.
Well, I'm feeling disappointed in the answers, but they sound pretty reasonable given the circumstances. Your wind seems intuitively not very feasible when you have 200-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, even wind vanes on weather systems blow away before that.
Right.
Regularly. But solar seems intuitively, again, to be a lot more of a reasonable possibility, and so I guess, again, I'm a bit disappointed that didn't happen here. I know that the resort, of course, is the big user. Well, I assume they're the big user. I don't even know that, but and they were very. The environmental ratings for the resort were, I think, being kind at giving them a D-, based largely on the air pollution, I believe, but I'm not certain again. So it seemed like, from their point of view only, that it would be an opportunity to become the first ski resort that's completely off the grid. And I could imagine them suddenly landing on the cover of every ski magazine and taking out some of the cost differential in marketing.
Well, the ability to be 100% renewable is easier connected to the grid than
I
not
understand
connected.
at this point in time.
Well, even it's easier than trying to find enough energy resources in one spot that's going to be reliable year-round. So we are now at 20% everyone here is at 20% renewables currently, and we move it to 33. We could offer 100% if people wanted it, because we're connected to the grid. So we have a lot more choice now than we had otherwise. But if there's strong interest in increasing the amount of renewables, we have a lot of flexibility that we can consider once we finish this project.
Yeah, the thing with solar was, where do you put it in quantity? I mean, where do you do it? I mean, the only place I could find, to be honest, other than a roof, was if you're on the Thunder Peak Trail and you go past the avalanche control panels up there over the spur. There's a fairly large, maybe an acre of relatively open land, or it's oriented the same way. at most, that would give us 1 megawatt of power, at most. And we never would have gotten through the Forest Service and the trail people and the environmental, certain of the environmental people. It never would have happened.
And what's our peak usage relative to that?
Right now, our peak usage is about 3 or 3.5 megawatts, but we're, at build-out, it'll probably, the peak usage is, I mean, the specific plan says 10 megawatts. I don't think that'll happen personally, but maybe 8.
Eric, could you speak up? Bob is having a,
Oh,
yeah, it would be speaking up into that.
into this or into this?
Into that.
Sorry, Bob, my, I guess my computer was in the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me see if there's other comments on the proposed rate changes from the public. Okay, so then I'd like to close the public session of the hearing and go back to board comments on the adoption of the proposed rate changes.
My only comment is I'd be more comfortable if Section 6 automatic adjustments for inflation were more articulate about, because what it says here is beginning on July 1st, 2014, and each July 1st thereafter, the usage rate, base rate, and meter charge components of these services shall automatically increase due to inflation. And I'm not sure, usage rate probably includes the whole thing, right? I mean, usage rate excluding the cost of the fuels, I think would be a more accurate statement.
Fuels and debt service.
And debt service as well.
And depreciation is not subject to inflation.
Yeah, if we go the full way, yeah.
So we could exclude those 3 elements, or Michael, do you have a proposed solution?
I fully thought out the diesel portion of that. I have no issues. I'd like to think about the depreciation and the debt service, but, excuse me?
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
Just a comment on that, in Howard Barnes's financial forecast, that's calling for the 3.5% increase, it does include, we're talking about the.
Just the rate increase?
Just the CPI
automatic.
inflation, annual inflation. Those things that don't increase in cost, we shouldn't be passing on a theoretical increase to customers. So I would like to propose that this Section 6 be modified to say the usage rate, parentheses, excluding the cost of fuel, debt service, and depreciation, parentheses.
And since that's an automatic adjustment, if we ever discover we were wrong for some reason, we would take that rate case and do an adjustment in the rate case itself as opposed to automatic.
Right.
Happen.
I don't think
Okay.
that's.
Good.
So I would like to.
Let me just see if there's other board comments. Bob, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, happy.
No.
Okay.
Then this is Rickard, propose adoption of ordinance number 14-04 with the modification to section 6 as we've discussed.
Dover seconds that.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Not, we'll do roll call vote. Rickard?
Rickard, aye.
Bob Endy?
Indeed, aye.
Dornbrook?
Dover guy.
Okay, and Epstein, aye, so the resolution 14.4 passes. And that concludes the hearing. We'll now move on to the next item, item 8E, discussion possible approval of ordinance 14-4, adjusting district, or is that, no, that was what we just did. Right, so we're now on to 14F. Okay. Possible approval of the 5-year operating budget and capital plan. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
And that says resolution 14-14.
Right.
Okay.
So I am thrilled to be able to present the 5-year operating budget and capital plan for the fiscal year beginning in 2014-15. This is the first time that we've had a 5-year operating plan and budget. Many thanks to Jill Campbell for all of her work and preparation. The capital plan is also incorporated into this, and it has been revised. The narrative portion have been revised through comments that were received at the last meeting.
Are those revisions, they're not in the board packet though, is that correct? Or
No,
are they?
they're in the board packet. The
To
revised
the-
capital plan? Yes.
The revised assumptions.
The revised budget assumptions?
I can get you a
For
copy,
the-
but the packet was done
Yeah.
before.
I have it online, okay. But there's a revised board packet in box. Does that include the final wording?
Yes. And that would be the narrative portion of the capital plan? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so that has been revised and has the new language in it.
Well, this is, I'm sorry, I'm not following. I'm looking at the fiscal year 2015 to 19 budget key assumptions.
So what I just was talking about was the narrative for the capital plan.
Okay, okay,
And we had comments at the last meeting with regards to the
Right.
narrative, and I said that I would be revising the narrative portion. That has
Okay.
been revised and is in your packet.
okay.
So key assumptions for the 2015 through 19 budget, the Russ Fund, this assumes that the B8 loans will be received in August, as previously reported. Due to the most recent talks with PG&E, it is assuming that all of the Out Valley project will be funded through the A8 and B8 loans, and none of the capital reserves will be used to fund those. In previous meetings, we had talked about using those. That's a board decision, but this is what the budget is based on. Total debt service for 2015 is $3.5 million. We had a rate strategy on December 23rd. We had several goals. One of the goals was to present a 5-year budget. One of the goals is to maintain capital reserves in concert with our debt service. Currently, this budget is $300,000 short. We will maintain a $3.2 million capital reserve instead of 3.5. Operating cash will meet the $2 million goal in 2015, with December 2014 being the lowest cash month at $2,067,000. Only 1 month in the 5-year projection doesn't meet that $2 million operating cash goal, and that is December of 2015, which has a $1.5 million balance. It assumed that the Out Valley project will be completed in November of 2014, and depreciation will begin in 2014. 2015 production numbers for water, wastewater, electric, propane are based on a 2-year average of actual production in 2013 and 14. Budgeted revenues of 2016 through 19 assume a 2% increase, and also assume the 1.2% increase due to the CPI. Operating expenses for 2015 are budgeted to increase by 2%. Wastewater rates in 2015 and 16 are budgeted to increase by additional 3.5% as already approved by the board at their meeting in the fall. Electric revenues assume the rate increase that we just approved, and the propane revenues assume the decrease that was just approved. The electric budget assumes that 100% of property tax revenues will be allocated to the electric department. The electric budget assumes a reduced cost in PG&E O&M cost to $135,000 a year. And the propane budget, as mentioned, assumes the rate decrease. So that is the key assumptions for the 2015 through 19 year. Jill Campbell is here to answer any questions that you have. But once again, staff recommends approval of Resolution 1414 approving the 2015 through 19 budget and capital plan.
What's the reason for the December 15th drop in cash?
Typically, December is our lowest cash flow.
But I mean, down
December,
to 1.5, I mean,
Yeah.
specifically down to 1.5.
We start paying principal on the Rust loan in March of 2015. The first 2 years of the loan is just interest. So that's a good chunk.
And that's why December drops. Somehow it all works through so that drops. And then I think, I can't find exactly where I noted it, but somewhere along the line, it also appears that salary and benefit, some of the salary and benefits lines drop. I'm not quite sure which year that was. I'm not finding it in my notes real quickly, but what's the reason for that?
In this next year, they do drop some when the Out Valley line is complete. We will decrease some electric staff.
So then the O&M cost associated with Out Valley kind of
Right.
makes up for that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, Bob Andy, any questions?
Just a procedural one, not a detailed budget question, but is it normal for us to actually have a resolution for adopting the budget as opposed to just having the budget? Seems kind of funny in a way, but don't have a problem with it. It just seems odd.
yes, Bob, it is normal. We always adopt a resolution approving the budget every year since
Okay.
And I'd also like to mention to the board that I've reviewed this, and the Finance Committee has reviewed this, and Standish has reviewed this, and is supportive.
All right, and
One last question I have, and I know it's probably not a big number in any case, but is there any projection of the connection fees collected in these budgets?
Connection fees collected.
No,
So that would be a little bonus
Yep.
if we
this
get
is
them.
just operating.
Okay, well, I would like to comment that this was a really big undertaking to try to look at everything that might happen over the next 5 years across all operations, and at least have, I mean, it's not, the actual results may vary, but to at least have a starting model to think about and understand really gives me a lot more comfort financially, that we know how to operate the business and make sure that we're operating it prudently. So I really want to congratulate staff on a very challenging assignment. Really good work.
Yeah, I have to say, as I read through this, it was another one of those miracles, just like the project being done on time.
Yes. Well, if you don't have to put in any overhead poles on the budget, maybe it makes it a little simpler. Somebody see if there's a motion to approve Resolution 1414.
This is Rickard. I so move to approve that resolution, 1414.
Dornbrook will second that.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, do a roll call vote.
Rickard, aye.
Bob Endy?
Indeed, aye.
Okay, Dornbrook?
Dornbrook, aye.
Okay, and Epstein, aye. So Resolution 1414 passes. We now move on to item 8G, presentation and possible action regarding the performance of Snow Removal Services Department and the possible approval of credits for the 2014-15 season. Michael?
In your packet, you'll find a recap of snow removal financials for 13-14 fiscal year. Actually, it's the snow season year. It was a light year. We show refunds of 12.57% for those associations. Participating. This compares to an 8.31% credit for last year. Total credit would amount to $50,000. Our district practice and staff's recommendation is to apply this credit to associations that return to the district program the following year. So for those associations returning for 14-15, they would receive a 12.5% credit off of the contract amount. At this point, district staff does not look at any increase or the contract amount. Contracts for 14-15 will go out in August, and we'll come back before the board for approval prior to submittal to the associations. We are building reserve, and we're looking at what next pieces of equipment that we'll need to maintain our fleet. Will it be a new trackless? Will it be a medium-sized blower? More to come. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 1416, authorizing credits for the 14-15 season in the amount of $49,372, as shown on the attachment.
The only question I have no problem with, I mean, the refunds are, it's just, I guess, arithmetic, but the, since the total of the contract amounts for those associations who have been participating was $392,800, and the proposed contract amount for those same associations for 14-15 is $411,500. It seems like a small increase. Is that, do I read that correctly? In the contract amount?
There's one difference there, and that is the Logic Kirkwood is shown as a proposed contract, but it was not received this last year.
And Cable's View also.
Okay,
And Cable View.
Yeah, so there's 2 new contracts we would hope to acquire.
got it. Okay, thanks. I was thinking that maybe you knew we were going to get a lot of snow.
Well, actually, that's the benefit, one of the benefits is that we get a lot of snow, we still just make the same money, we don't charge extra, so.
Okay, are there any questions? Are there any questions from the public, comments?
Yeah, Dorberg's prepared to move to approve Resolution 14-16.
Rickard seconds.
Okay.
Rickard, aye.
Okay. Bob Enden, how do you vote?
NDI.
Okay.
Dorberg, aye.
NDI.
Okay, and Epstein, aye. So Resolution 1416 passes.
Just as a comment, I did have a chat with Michael about this and suggested that we try to communicate more broadly than just to the affected homeowners associations, so that they, that all homeowner associations know that we give back money when there's a low snow year, which I don't think is true in the case of our competitor, and sort of blow our horn and flash our lights to show them that we're doing a good job watching out for their interests, and make that visible to all.
Okay, good. So we now move on to item 8H, discussion possible adoption of water stage alert in Kirkwood due to the ongoing drought in the state of California. Michael.
As everyone knows, we're in the middle of a drought in California. How does it affect Kirkwood? Well, to be quite honest, currently our aquifer levels are extremely strong. But they should be this time of year with the snow melt. Our aquifer level at the beginning of the month was about 122 feet. At the end of the month, it was about 137. So it actually increased by 12 feet or so, 15 feet throughout the month. And that's typical for us because, our snow melt is at this point of the year and it's tailing off. Still, we are in the middle of a drought. 15 to 30% of our normal snowpack at this point. As a precaution, and since we do not know the impacts of this drought and how it will affect Kirkwood in the fall when we are severely impacted, and as we have no other resources except our groundwater, staff will recommend, or is recommending, that the board declare a water stage alert level 2. So what will that mean? A level 2 water shortage entails that outdoor irrigation of all vegetation, including lawns and landscaping, is limited to twice a week, 45 minutes per zone, between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. And there's certain watering days that are included in the water stage. So that's 2 days a week, 45 minutes per zone. It's not real onerous. And we are in similar situation in South Lake Tahoe already. We already have those. No water shall be used for irrigation, landscaping for new construction. Watering with a handheld hose or drip irrigation can be done, but only during the times listed in your watering period. Watering impervious covers such as sidewalk, driveways, parking areas, washing these areas can be done, but once again, only in your designated times for those periods. Those activities should be done with an automatic hose shut-off nozzle. And water for new construction period purposes is limited to construction trades only for dust control and with written district authorization. So staff recommends approval of Resolution 1415 declaring the water stage alert Stage 2.
The question I have is how will, for example, for East Meadows, watering days Saturday and Tuesday, how will that be communicated?
Well, I was going to communicate this through the newsletter, through postings in the area, and through various emails, as we would normally do. And I think this is mostly a communication issue. I think everyone wants to conserve. Someone asked me at a meeting, how are you going to enforce this? And actually, I hadn't even hardly thought of that, because I think that the general sentiment in Kirkwood is, oh yeah, sure, of course, that's exactly what I'll do. We're in the middle of a drought.
But maybe through the HOA meetings as well that happen in July.
Who's the recommendation of the Operations Capital Committee to approve this?
Okay.
So I'm prepared to move to approve it prior to any comments from the,
Okay.
subsequent to any comments from the public.
Understood. Any other comments? Anyone? Okay.
Yeah, Dornberg
Motion?
moves to approve this resolution.
Rickard seconds.
Okay, so do a roll call vote.
Rickard, aye.
Okay, Bob Andy?
Indeed, aye.
Okay.
Dornberg, aye?
Okay, and Epstein, aye. So our water stage alert, Resolution 1415 passes. Michael, let me ask you one question which I failed to ask earlier when we asked where you put it. There was a question submitted over the web about the G&A expense related to snow removal, where I want to make sure we discuss that somewhere during the meeting. Obviously, I missed what might have been the most appropriate window. So where should we?
I saw the email. She's not using the correct overall G&A expense. She's using 384, and our G&A expense is actually over $1 million. So the percentages that we're using are correct. I haven't looked at it, and I'm sure Jill hasn't looked at it as well to respond directly.
Okay, so just to fill, Nancy Trevitt submitted a question about the G&A, the percentage of G&A for this currently closing fiscal year as compared to the next one, and then how it's calculated. So you'll just communicate
I
back
will.
to her? Okay.
But at first glance at that, Bob, I think she's using the correct overall G&A total of $384,000. That's low. Our total G&A is much higher than that.
Right.
And thereby our 11% or 8% snow removal does make sense.
Okay. Bob, did you want to add something?
No, just that she did copy, she sent it to all of us, so it was not clear how we would respond, but Michael's obviously the right person to respond on behalf of all of us.
Okay, great. All right. Excuse that interruption, out of order. So we move on to 8I, discussion and possible approval of proposal to install new main regulators on the propane system to ensure service reliability for a total cost of $26,394.
The pressure in the propane system is maintained by two water bath vaporizers and the associated set of pressure regulators. A set of direct fire vaporizers provides backup. The direct fire vaporizers are in that shed, that metal shed that's across from the wastewater treatment plant that you've probably seen. And these direct fire vaporizers The district has actually installed both of these since we've owned the district. Mountain Utilities only operated off the direct fire. The first one, which I believe was the green one, or the blue one, I can't remember which was which.
I believe the blue one was first.
The blue one we installed when we first purchased Mountain Utilities, and then this last one was purchased and installed last year. These control the pressures in the valley, and then the regulators are in the back here, and you can see those. They regulate the pressures as well. During a period of cold temperatures on January 25th, 2014, the propane system dropped from the normal 12 psi to 4 psi. Staff was able to start one of our direct fire backup vaporizers and return the system to normal. Kiva, who is our service provider and gives us actually sells us our propane and also does our service for the propane system, investigated and determined that the pressure sensing line of the regulators common to both water bath vaporizers was piped incorrectly. So the water sensing line that affected both the vaporizers shut down the entire system, so we had direct fire units only. A temporary hose was actually installed. This is our state-of-the-art repair. Was actually installed to correct that problem. As a result of this issue, it became apparent that the regulation system at the water bath vaporizers could jeopardize our ability to maintain system pressure. The set of regulators that serve the water bath vaporizers were mismatched, as the illustration shows clearly, and they're quite old. One has no service records on it, and one is 7 years old. Loss of propane system pressure is a major concern with huge impacts. Relighting of every service, 425 units, having to go inside 425 private homes and relighting their propane services. Mountain Utilities actually did it. Brandy, were you involved in that relight?
I was not. I've just been told the stories.
Yeah, I think Cheryl actually did some of the communications. Horrendous. Possible liability for gas flowing through unit pilots that haven't been checked. Possible liability for frozen pipes if you don't get in there. Since a replacement set of regulator has a lead time of 4 to 6 weeks, staff is recommending that a redundant system of regulators actually be installed. What this would do would replace the existing water baths that you saw in the previous pictures with a dual system where one water bath could be operated independently of the other and have its own associated regulator. The regulators that we have now would be cleaned, resurfaced, and placed on the shelf for replacement. So this is a truly redundant system, though through build-out we will need both of these water bath vaporizers. This is just not for redundancy. We will operate these as we go along. It's staff's recommendation that the water bath regulator piping be modified as shown, and that 2 regulators be installed, a set for each water bath. Staff recommends board approval of the attached proposal from Kiva for $26,000 to replace all 4 regulators. Staff did check on the market for the cost of the regulators and have found that the markup on those was only 1%. So I think they've done a good job of keeping. We also contacted the manufacturer, and he is dropping his price by $300 due to our inquiry. So staff recommends approval through Kiva.
Yeah, this was discussed at length by the Operations Capital Committee, and there were concerns that we get competitive prices, and Michael has done that. So that's our recommendation, is to approve this project.
Right. Is this in the 5-year capital plan?
Actually, it is.
Okay, good. That was the right answer.
So Dornbrook moves to approve this contract with Kiva in the cost of $26,394.
Is there a second?
Rickard seconds.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Comments? Okay, roll call vote.
Rickard, aye.
Okay, Bob Andy?
Indeed, aye.
Dornbrook, aye?
And Epstein, aye. Okay, so we now move on to item 8J. Discussion, possible action regarding a notice of violation received from the Central Valley Regional Quality Control Board and possible approval to replace the wastewater treatment plant influent meter for a cost of $14,500.
So as the capital projects committee knows, we had a request from Vail to actually pave the parking lots that are sitting right out here. And we put a formal request into the Central Valley Regional Board to see what it would take to actually pave over the parking lot. The issue is that we have our absorption beds under the parking lot. I mean, there's a biological reaction with absorption beds where they need oxygen. If you pave over them, there's a feeling that they go stagnant or they're septic. So they have been paved over in other places, but it's an engineered aspect where you have to actually put grates or vegetation areas or paving stones that actually work somewhere where you can transfer that oxygen. This was forwarded to the regional board as a request. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't want to raise your hand, and we raised our hand, and it prompted a thorough review of our permit, and it resulted in the notice of violation. Due to our renumbering of our effluent beds, the regional board thought we were discharging into new beds. Actually, what we had done is renumbered them from the 1 to 10 numbering system to a 1 through 14 numbering system. We didn't go to new beds. We didn't construct any new beds. We just renumbered them. We've notified the regional board of this, and we're going to go back to our previous numbering system so we don't have to revise our permit. But we are permitted and are discharging into the effluent beds that are shown here. This is the vehicle shop. These are the beds that are right outside of here. And what we had done is we installed 6 beds here, and we numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4 rather than 1, 2 through 6. So, hence the issue. They also noted that we have not yet replaced our influent meter that has been budgeted, is part of our capital plan. We had just not completed it because we were using there's an influent meter that measures how much is going into the wastewater plant, and there's an effluent meter that's measuring how much goes out of it. We were taking our measurements off the effluent meter because it's kind of the same, you're going to get the same result. Wastewater treatment plants don't store much water. But they want us to replace the influent meter, which has not been frozen and has not been working correctly for many years. So it is staff's recommendation to accept the Aqua Sierra control cost not to exceed $14,500. Now you'll look on the cost and say, well, the bid is $14,900. Aren't you reading your proposal, Michael, or what was the cause there? We've worked it out with Aqua Sierra where we'll actually purchase the equipment in-house, thereby saving funds because they won't have to be marking it up with the contractor's markup. So the cost will actually come down not to exceed $14,500. We will be dropping the issue of paving over the parking lots until Vail gets more serious about their desire to pave and wants to hire either our engineer or a different engineer to actually do the analysis that the regional board looked at to incorporate whether they can actually pave over the parking lots or not. And so with that, staff recommends the approval of the new influent meter installation.
And the operations committee concurs with staff on
Okay.
that issue.
Yeah, I know that this was, we were planning on doing this in any case at some point. So.
Okay, any other comment? Anyone? All right.
So Norbert moves to approve the contract for $14,500 for a new influent meter.
Rickard seconds.
Okay, do a roll call vote.
Rickard, aye.
Okay, Bob Endy?
DI.
Okay,
Norbert, aye?
and Epstein, aye. That completes item 8J. So now item 8K, discussion possible action regarding a wastewater spill which occurred on May 30th and possible approval to replace compressors and install redundant float system for a cost of $8,987.
On On May 30th, the district had a wastewater spill of 150 gallons on the East Meadows area near Astor Court. This spilled from our east lift. This is a failure of the compressors that operate a bubbler system which turn on the pumps and activate the alarm system. This diagram, thanks to Rick for putting it together, this diagram kind of shows what the operation's like, and his arrows actually show the travel of the spill. But what actually happens is this is a collection manhole, and the wastewater comes into that. It fills up this wet well, which once it gets to this level, it activates through these compressors. It activates the pumps, and it pumps it down, which pumps it through these pumps here and goes on a force main over to the main lift and then into the wastewater treatment plant. This here is the high level, so if these pumps don't come on and it hits that high level, an alarm comes on and tells the operators that you've got a high lift, your pumps aren't turning on, you've got a problem. These compressors here operate both the alarm and the pumps, and if they both fail, you don't get an alarm and you don't get your pumps turned on, hence the backward flow of wastewater. This fills up, goes back into the manhole, and then comes out the lid, as obvious. And luckily, Rich and Carolyn Williams were walking in the area, noticed it. We were able to track when exactly the last time that these pumps turned on through our SCADA system, and we're able to narrow down the period of time that actually pumped, and we're actually come up with the 150 gallon. But once again, if it wasn't for the Williams, it could have been much worse and much longer, though this is a pretty highly traveled area. The district is proposing to replace both of these compressors and to purchase 2 new ones to sit on the shelf so that this issue does not happen in the future. Secondly, we'd like to install a redundant float system so that if these compressors do go down in the future, we have a redundant float system that'll tell us that we have an alarm in our east lift. This is an Achilles heel for us. If these pumps stop working, we have to call in like a septic service to come and start pumping this out. So this is a really important area for us. We've spent quite a bit of money. This was installed with the installation of the East Meadows subdivision. Staff is recommending an expenditure not to exceed $9,000 to replace these pumps and put in the redundant float system.
The committee felt that this was a real good idea.
Okay. Mike, I have one question. Do we have other systems in other locations that would have a similar problem?
We only have one other lift at the district, and it is at the main lift, and it has a redundant float system. It does not have this high-tech compressor bubbler system.
Okay. Okay. Not seeing any other comments or questions. Is
Yeah,
there a motion?
Norbert moves to approve the project for the amount of approximately $9,000.
Okay.
Yeah, Rickard seconds.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote.
Rickard, aye.
Okay. Bob Endy?
NDI.
Norbert, aye.
And Epstein, aye. Okay, and that completes all the items in section 8. So we now go to 9, the manager's report, starting with the general manager's report.
In your packet, you'll find the action items from the May 10th board meeting. I think we've made good progress on those action items, and shortly after this meeting, you'll see the action items from June 14th. General manager objectives are in the packet. I have notified all of the committees that were looking for their input. They have asked me to come up with the general manager's perspective of how we did for the 2013-14 GMOs and some suggestions for the 14-15 GMOs and get those out to the committees. I'll get those out to the committees, and then they will give me input by June 25th and also copy Standish O'Grady on that input. It's my goal to have that all incorporated for a closed session meeting with the board on July 6th to go over the GMOs and to approve approve the GMOs for 14 and 15, which is earlier than we did last year, but I think it's good to get this stuff done in advance. The newsletter and the consumer confidence report is also in your packet. The planning committee has been working with staff on our water rights issue, and we have been gathering, our next step, if the board remembers, is that we have been gathering support for our water rights project. And just to remember, our water rights project is the perfection of our water rights to Caples Lake. And what the plan would be, in 1996, EID reached a settlement in which they perfected their rights to Caples Lake, and in the settlement, the judge reserved 200 acre-feet of water from Caples and Silvers Lake for county of origin upcountry use. This effort would perfect those rights for the district, and we've been making presentations to Alpine County, Amador County, the Forest Service, and others, garnering support for this project, because the worst thing you want to do when you go to the state board is have a protest. That just stops the whole action and puts you into another category. We also were directed by planning to get our firm bids from the water rights engineer, RCI for the environmental, and to know what our costs are going to be before we submit the application. One of the items that planning looked at was how much water would be needed. I think it's important that I mention this before the board. The capacity shows that we will eventually need 42 million gallons of water. Our current capacity is about half of that, about 20 million gallons of water. By the way, an acre foot of water is about 325,000 gallons. So, 20 million gallons, which is our current use, is about 61 acre feet. Our capacity report by Matt Wheeler recommends that we apply for 130 acre feet, which is basically our entire demand. And planning committee went over these numbers and recommended that we follow suit. So this will be coming back before the board in August, before we do file for approval for filing an application. And as this time, we'll be using the 130 acre foot number.
I'd just like to clarify my understanding that our current system with additional storage of, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of gallons of storage, could possibly meet our ultimate demand, our build-out demand. We're not really certain of that, but it could. But so what this does is it assures that we will have sufficient capacity to meet demand with some backup if necessary.
Yes.
Right?
And whether our current system would actually give us twice the amount of water or not.
It's unknown, right?
The last thing I have is the district participate in a Help Us Clean Up Kirkwood Day that the Kirkwood Mountain Resort Dale put on. It was well attended. We had, 10 or 15 district staff members there, and there must have been the same, if not more, Dale Resort people. We went out at 10 o'clock with bags and took different sections of the valley and cleaned them up for a couple hours, and then Dale fed us with hot dogs and hamburgers afterwards. So I thought it was a real nice community event, getting everyone together to clean it up. And I look forward to other events which our community, such as our wine tasting that Rick will mention in the future. So, and that concludes my management report.
Okay, any questions on the manager's report? Okay, so Rick, can you give us the operations report?
Yes, sir. Good morning. On page 137 in the board's packet is the current wastewater treatment plant maintenance layout form that we use to help us stay on track of the equipment, make sure everything's running properly. And I'm pleased pleased to announce since the last board meeting, we were able to resolve a few issues. One of the issues was the pickup pump for the old Betsy, the old Caterpillar reserve generator day tank. Previously, we had a hand transfer diesel into the tank. It's a small tank, but it was time consuming, definitely a problem for us, but we've had a consultant come up and resolve that issue, so now we can pump in manual. We're actually going to upgrade the tank a little bit and put some extra floats in there to make it automated, which was what it was once designed to do. We also had consultants from Tesco come up and resolve a couple of VFD issues, and we'll currently continue with Tesco on resolving a couple other control issues with the plant. But so far, we're very pleased with the membranes and the way the plant's working, and we've been working with District Engineer Matt Wheeler on the warranty compliance required documentation. So we're feeling very confident in what we've done, and again, very pleased with the coat membranes. As for the water meter project, pleased to announce that we believe we're over 60% complete for the remote read project. Out of 875 meters, 553 meters have been replaced. Actually, probably more now since the committee, since the beginning of the week. There's a stack of completed work orders just waiting to be processed. So we're zeroing down to get some of the harder remote meters that are underneath people's homes that are secured. So in the next couple of weeks, we hope to try to finish this project by July 1 as well. And unless there's any questions about that, I'll move on to the next item, which is the demonstration meadow trail. On pages 138 through 143 are some information to the board for the trail. But I'm pleased to announce just this week we completed our meadow trail example, which is right here behind the community service building. And it's a small trail that just leads to the meadow, but using the design standards on page 138 and suggested comments for trail construction through a trail building contractor, Don Hayes, we were able to build this trail within a few days, and it came out quite nice. But more information about the trail will be available at our barbecue. We'll have a table set up, and so if anybody's interested in talking about the meadow trail or have ideas or comments, and we can come to the table and ask them for us. Yeah.
So has the board seen the trail?
I'm planning on doing it after this meeting.
Great.
It looks
great.
good.
So yeah, we will after this meeting, we will not only show a video of the pole being installed, which is pretty exciting, but we'll take you down into the trail too, if you're interested.
And staff has been enjoying the trail already. There's been a few folks out there drinking their cup of coffee, and yeah, it's really quite nice. Moving on, the Loop Road Phase 2 project we're preparing for. As you know, we had an issue with the direct berry line between the Renwick and Kirkwood's vehicle maintenance shop a couple years ago, and so we decided that it was necessary for us to replace the direct berry line on Loop Road. Phase 1 was complete, and now we're on to Phase 2, which is installing an electric line between the transformer behind the youth hostel in Renwick on Loop Road around to the wastewater treatment plant near the propane vaporizers and across the street from the wastewater treatment plant. This week, staff was able to pothole in several different locations to kind of identify what's in the ground and to basically prepare the site for construction. And so in the next 2 weeks, we'll start trenching and installing that line.
So will this phase complete the loop of the propane as well or not?
No, sir, this will not. This is just for the electric line only. Phase 3 will again carry the electric line from wastewater treatment plant around to the oil switches here at the vehicle maintenance shop, and that phase will include propane.
But both are planned to be done this year.
Okay.
So phases 2 and 3 are planned to be done in 2014.
So phase 2 will be essentially 460 feet of direct berry line in conduit, including installing a new line junction enclosure, LJE, near Renwick as well. So again, we hope to have this project done by July 1st. We'll be cutting it close. It's a pretty big job. And then moving on, 4 for my report is the ISO rating. On pages 144 and 145 are the cover letters that we received from ISO, officially telling us that we're going to maintain our ISO 4 rating here in the Kirkwood Valley. So, again, staff will work hard and diligently to maintain that rating and do whatever we need to maintain it. The next review from ISO will probably be 3 to 5 years from now, but there are some simple things that we're going to do between now and then just to kind of make sure that we don't ever get the letter saying, you know, you could lose it. So, but I'm pleased to announce that we're going to maintain this 4 rating. And then finally, for my report, I just wanted to talk about the barbecue. On pages 146 is the proposed menu from Vail Resorts, which is a little bit different than years past, but we're very excited with the donation that the Vail Resort Eco program is going to present to us for the barbecue. Jason and Scarlett from the resort have worked really hard on trying to create something unique and different, and we're currently working on the layout of the venue to hopefully prevent some of the lines that we had in the past. And Cheryl's had some great ideas about registration and how to, again, prevent lines and make sure everybody has a good time. Out of Bounds will be our band this year. I know that the information's on the website if anyone would like to sign up. And we're currently looking for volunteers. Lady Culver's graciously offered to help volunteer for not only the barbecue, but for the death ride, which is coming on July 12th. And I'm pleased to announce that we've received over $8,000 in donations so far, which is just amazing. And this will help us hopefully purchase the chipper, which I think will be great for the community. There's a picture of the chipper on page 148. We've sort of changed the idea of purchasing a chipper on a trailer to purchasing a chipper that we can put on one of our existing snow removal tracklesses by using a PTO. And this will reduce the cost significantly. The cost for a chipper on a trackless is about $10,000 versus $18,000, $19,000. So very excited about the barbecue and looking forward to seeing the community, plus just having a great afternoon. And one of the things like we had last year in the barbecue, and Cheryl Stern, who's in the audience, may want to comment on this as well, is that we will have the silent auction and the live auction. And some of the notable items in the live auction will be an iPad mini. It's been graciously donated by Sandy and Joshua Goldberg. There's a San Francisco experience, one night hotel stay, which was donated by Ann Stanish O'Grady. This includes dinner and passes to the Academy of Sciences and passes to, I guess, a meeting event at the Academy of Sciences as well. And then a Park City condo, a 4-day lift ticket for Park City Mountain Resort, which was donated by Alan Herbs and Vicki Ventura. So is that about right, Cheryl? Have I got those right? This is a draft of our pamphlet that we'll hand out, and I'm just kind of highlighting that other than, of course, season passes. Auctioning off the season passes again this year.
Actually, those are the items from last year that you mentioned. So you're looking at last year's pamphlet. I'm in the process of writing up this year's, but we have a really nice selection of items for the live auction. San Francisco experience is a little different than last year. We've got some tickets to Stanford football games that are paired with an overnight stay in a hotel down in Palo Alto, along with some dinner certificates, which are much appreciated. So Ann O'Grady has really done a fabulous job of creating these packages, which make the items so much more enticing. And in addition to the live auction items, we have about 50 silent auction items that we're compiling. So.
Okay, I stand corrected. You sent me this draft, and I thought this was this year's current draft of the pamphlet, so my mistake.
Sorry.
Anyway, we're working hard on it, and we're excited about the barbecue. So.
And I assume these samples are part of your presentation?
Yes, they are. This is this year's glass. So.
I'm sorry there's nothing in them. But that can be rectified.
Got it.
Out on the path.
Okay, any questions for Rick? Okay, thank you. All right, next up, Brandy. Update on electric and propane systems.
See the date on that? I'm not really sure.
Morning. I will start this morning on page 152 of your packet. We have a sketch here that shows our main vault configuration. And I wanted to mention this because, I'll talk that way, because we had a scheduled power outage on May 22nd. The purpose of this power outage was for two reasons. The first was to allow Wilson to look at our switchgear in the powerhouse where the out valley line's coming in and to determine whether or not they would need to have an additional outage to pull the wire into our switchgear and make the connections. Exponential Engineering is going to give us the final official response to their request, but from what we saw on the 22nd, it looks like they will be able to do this with the rest of the system live. The second part of our outage was for our staff to investigate separating the lift circuit to a separate side of our switchgear. Right now, lifts is on the same side of our switchgear as commercial, which means that if we wanted to run the lifts on the powerhouse generators for some reason in the future, we would also have to run commercial on that. We'd like to get it separated, but we found during our investigation that we will not be able to do that quite as easily as we hoped. It's going to require running some new wire from the powerhouse vault here into vault 2. So since this wouldn't be an immediate benefit, we are looking into the cost and the possibility of doing that now versus at a later time. If we move on to the next page in your packet.
Can I ask a real quick question?
Sure.
I thought that if we're able to do that, that would also make testing our generators on a regular basis easier, right? It would provide a load for the generators to run against.
It would. We are also looking with Exponential into the possibility of a live transfer between the powerhouse and the out valley line. If we're not able to get that ironed out, so that would mean that we would be able to turn on the powerhouse and have a closed transformer so the lights don't blink in the valley when we go to powerhouse generators. If we are able to work that out, the project of switching the lift to the other side of the bus is not as immediately important.
So we would, for a very short period of time, run the whole valley on the powerhouse?
Potentially, yes. We would probably plan to do that midweek and at the nighttime, but it's looking like that might be a possibility. The next page of the packet is just an overview of the summer projects that the electric and propane departments are looking at this summer. The yellow box is the propane projects, red box is electric. And it's basically some annual maintenance, some CPUC issues. We are still finalizing this list, but this is a tentative list of what we would like to get accomplished this summer.
I just saw something about touch-up paint. I was noticing yesterday on a hike how much I guess is rust on our stacks outside the powerhouse. Is that a problem? Is that?
It's not a problem. They actually designed them that way to match the facade of the powerhouse. So the rusting
it's designed to actually rust. Oh,
was
okay.
an intentional,
Okay.
an intentional move.
So it'll look weird until it's all rusted, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Once it gets all one uniform color, it'll be better.
All right.
If there's no questions on those two items, I'll move on to the generator 7 replacement and generator repairs. We are still working with PowerSecure on the generator 7 replacement. Dave Morton, who was the original installer of the power plant, has stated that he thinks he'll be here mid-June to do that, so coming right up within the next couple of weeks. We will be receiving the new engine for number 7 before that, and our staff will unload that and store it on site until he We're expecting that to take about 2 weeks with the whole Volvo stack being down. That might be optimistic.
I'm gonna write 2 weeks down.
And we'll move on to the generator repairs at the powerhouse right now. Page 154 of your packet shows the CAT repairs that Holt of California was able to find when they did their inspection. As you can see, the list is quite extensive, and I'm happy to report that Generator 1 and Generator 3, all repairs have been completed. We are still waiting on number 2. We want to schedule that at a time where it doesn't conflict with the Volvo outage. And moving on to the Volvos themselves, pages 155 and 156 show a letter that we sent to PowerSecure on May 30th. As you know, PowerSecure was not able to extend the Volvo warranty past 5,000 hours. So we actually asked Holt to come and do the same inspection that they did on the CAT generators to the Volvos, and found, again, quite a few issues on each of the operable Volvos. So we reported these. We requested warranty replacement or repair, and we are waiting to hear back from PowerSecure on this. Of these issues, the most serious issue is number 4, the oil pressure sensor lines leaking onto the turbo, which causes a fire risk. So number 4 is down along with number 7. In additional news on generator repairs, we have been experiencing some overpressure alarms on our diesel particulate filters. We had a service visit by Johnson Matthey on May 19th through 22nd and pulled all of the filters out. The Volvos in particular had a very heavy buildup of ash that the technician thought was a combination of the slightly lower stack temperatures on the Volvo stack, along with potentially more oil that's being burned on those generators. They weren't, the Johnson Matthey technician was very happy that they had managed to get about 4,500 to 5,000 hours on these filters without having to clean them yet, but we were required to send those out for cleaning. They are back. They were put in service on Tuesday, and the Volvo line's back up. The CAT filters are not as, that don't have as much buildup as the Volvos did, but they will require cleaning soon. And this cost was put into the 5-year budget. Any questions on generators before I move to emissions?
Well, I just want to understand the implications. So, I mean, this is a light load season where the Volvos would be the most effective way of keeping costs down, and we're going to lose that opportunity.
Yes, we had them down for approximately a week and a half to do the cleaning of the DP filters. We'll have another outage once generator 7 is being replaced.
But they're online now.
Uh-huh.
So they're back on. To replace number 7, we'll have to take the whole line off because the entire exhaust system has to be installed.
Right.
Okay. And PowerSecure is estimating 5 days. Brandy was nice enough to give them 2 weeks. We'll see how long it takes.
Okay. The last topic on my report is the emissions testing update. On page 157, you have the Great Basin report from our cylinder gas audit that happened earlier this summer. And during that audit, things went well on 3 of the stacks, but stack number 2, we actually had the oxygen sensor not pass the test. We suspected at the time it was a bad oxygen sensor, but in further investigation, we actually found water in our compressed air lines going to that system, and that has a potential to cause more problems. We had an air dryer go out on our air compressor that's feeding that stack. Since we found this, we've actually been running that stack off of another air compressor that's dry, but we're going to have some tech come out and take a look at overall troubleshooting for that stack and see if any additional problems were caused, and also replace the O2 sensor and get it ready for retesting. That visit is tentatively scheduled for June 23rd. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any
No more
questions?
questions, sir.
No? Bob, Andy?
None, sir.
Okay. All right, so that completes that item. So administrative report, Jill?
I will go ahead and start with the performance reporting. It's on page 158 of the packet. I will start with electric, and just note that May kilowatt hour sales are down about 16,000 kilowatt hour from plan. Year-to-date sales are down 564,000 kilowatt hours for plan. And our average year-to-date kilowatt hour per gallon is at about 13.4. May's, as discussed at the Finance Committee meeting a little bit, May's unmetered percentage is at 18%. This is after what we account for in line loss. So this is an action item for staff to figure out what's going on in there. I know with May, it was too wet to get to the backside chairs to read those meters. I feel that that's just a small reason for this variance, but it is something we're looking at. I was hoping that with the new remote meters that this percentage would go down. So we're looking at that and we'll come back with a report. For propane, our May propane sales are up 89,000 cubic feet from plan, but our year-to-date sales are down 1.9 million cubic feet from plan. Our unmetered for propane is much better. It is 1% average for the year. Propane has a lot less of line loss, but with the new remote read meters, that's helped. And there was also a leak study done in propane this year. So I'm happy with that with the propane. For wastewater, our May sales are down 528,000 gallons from plan, but year-to-date sales are still up from plan by 744,000 gallons. This is the first year that we actually budgeted usage in wastewater, so this is a good indication on how to budget in the future. Are there any questions on performance reporting? I'll go ahead and go to financials and start with the balance sheet on page 161. April operating fund balance is at just under $3 million. Our reserve fund balance is sitting at $3.2 million, and as stated in the budget, this number is planning on remaining stable as funds won't be needed for the Out Valley project if the full $8 million in REST funds is used. And our total trustee special construction account for April is $5.8 million. We did pull about another $7 million in June. If there's no questions on that, I will go to the income statement.
I'll just mention one. At the Finance Committee, we discussed doing a rate analysis comparison of drawing down the full loan amount versus using some of our own funds and avoiding the borrowing. So we would want to look at that before we make any final decision or recommendation. The combined income statement is on page 163. And our April combined revenues are down 49,000 from plan, due mainly to electric. April net income is down 11,000 from plan.
You can see under G&A allocations for April that $40,000 in property taxes was allocated. That was all allocated to the electric department to cover the tier ratio. And year-to-date property taxes, $465,000 have been allocated to electric. I'll just go over a few notes on individual departments. For water, our year-to-date operations and maintenance costs are down $15,000 from plan. I think this is due a lot of this is due to us doing the capital remote read project. We haven't had to expense any meter replacements this year for water. Anytime an MXU failed this year, we had the operations staff replace those with the new remote read meters, so we could capitalize that and not have to take the expense. Also, our depreciation is down $24,000 from budget. That's due to the budget assuming that the meter replacement project would be complete. For wastewater, our operations and maintenance costs are down $41,000 from plan year to date. This is due a lot to the membrane replacement project. With the new membranes, we haven't had to use as many outside services for repairs. For electric, our year-to-date revenues are down $592,000 from plan. And as stated previously, $465,000 in property taxes have been allocated to electric to cover the tier ratio required by Russ. And snow removal, currently for April, it's showing a $69,000 net income. With the approval of snow removal credits, those credits will be applied to this year. It'll be a decrease in revenue, so that will eliminate our income in snow removal. Are there any questions on April financials? I'll just go ahead and mention the cash waterfall is on page 176, and it shows our May balance is at $3,455,000. With the approved budget, the next version and versions following for the cash waterfall include a forecast with the budgeted operating cash for at least a year out. So on the next version. Audit update. We did have our new auditors, Moss Adams, here all this last week. There was 2 full-time staff that'll be here to complete the audit, and their supervisor came for 1 day. I think it went very well. They're very thorough, which is good. They were great to talk to. They were very open and willing to help. They stressed to all staff to keep communication open. If we ever have a question, their line is always open for us to call and make sure that we get things done right before we hit the audit and have to have corrections. I think it went really well. They loved the area. They're already talking about how they can find a way to make it up here in the winter. And so for the final audit, they will be here mid-August. It will be the 2 staff members that came for the pre-audit, and they will have 1 more member of their Sacramento branch that will be here. So we look forward to that.
Okay, any other questions for Joe? Okay, then we're ready for committee reports. So I'll start first with communications. The two major areas we discussed. One was the ongoing efforts to improve the web services and access to it. We have a pretty good response now. We have 35% of all accounts are web access and being used, and 253 customers accessing, registering accounts. I mean, obviously our goal is to get closer to 100%, but that's making good progress. We're going to have a push during the wine tasting to try to get more people aware of what's available and the benefits of registering online. So that's one area we talked about. The second one we talked about is improving the facilities during board meetings. And we focused particularly on a couple areas. One is, can we improve the video and not have the advertising? And so far we've reached the conclusion we can only do that by spending a fair amount of money per meeting. And we don't really think that the access to it warrants that. So we're going to switch direction and look at, can we just improve the quality of the audio and live stream the audio and make that available, and then make sure that the presentations are easy to find on the web and follow that way. And then we could have pictures of us while we're talking or something. But we're going to move in that direction. Then also to make sure that the sound quality is good for board members participating remotely, so they can feel involved and hear everything. And Bob, I don't know if we just worked on microphone placement. I don't know if it's better this meeting than the last one or not.
So the quick feedback is, Michael, and your microphones are great. When it gets off to Eric or Peter or audience members, not great.
Yeah. So we're going to work on ideas to try to improve that. And the observation is we have a sound system, but we're not putting that through the telephone. If we did, that might correct things. So that's the immediate thing we're going to work on. So that's the update on communications. Next is planning.
And I think planning is next up.
Yes,
and,
it is.
Three things quick. First off, on water rates, we've already talked about the fact that we discussed carefully the amount that we should go forward to talk to other stakeholders and ultimately try to perfect our rates on, and that being 130 acre feet, i.e. 100% of our annual water requirement at full build out. I think that's a smart way to go at it, and that's the way we're proceeding. On the Meadow Trail, we of course saw some pictures of the demo trail. Everybody's going to get a chance to look at it. Also, there's a survey included in the packet, which was put together by Cheryl Stern, and Jeff Smith joined in on that later on, and we're pretty much ready to go with this. We want to do this quickly after the community has an opportunity to see the demo trail on the barbecue weekend. So we've talked about sending it out on July the 5th to try to quickly get a read on what the consensus of the community is on this proposal. And lastly, we talked about Kirkwood Meadows Drive parking, which is not so much directly our issue at KMPUD, although we have to, of course, participate and make sure we don't have blockage of cabinets or any impact on utilities. But the point of bringing this up is that it's a fairly significant proposal to add parking along Kirkwood Meadows Drive. And Michael, if I recall the number correctly, it was over 700 parking spaces, which is a heck of a lot of parking along Kirkwood Meadows Drive, and that would be something for all of us to be aware of.
Yeah, 750 spots, but currently they're parking somewhere around 700 and some odd spots, so it's not a huge increase. I think it's more effectively placed. And it's paved rather than on dirt.
Okay, so I misunderstood that. So the actual increase in the number of cars that could be parked along Kirkwood Meadows Drive is then quite small?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. I think those are the main topics for the planning committee.
Okay, good. Next one is finance, and we've covered most everything. We just want to comment that our main preoccupation now is the moving targets of what the actual PG&E costs will be as reflected in the rates, the various funding opportunities we have for debt, and trying to navigate that through to see if we can't shave some more costs out of the system by making some good decisions over the next three or 4 months. That's the main focus. Secondarily was meeting the auditors and then making sure that we're prepared to have a really good audit in August and have a timely completion of it by October 1st, I believe is the target that we gave them. Next is operations.
I think Rick and Brandy covered everything. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, and then personnel.
We're meeting on July 4th in order to do a final review of general manager's goals. There'll probably be some other issues on that agenda. I'm not sure what they will be. I do have a question, Michael, and that is, will we be planning another closed session to consider the general manager's salary and so on?
On July,
That will be on July 6th.
right, the final 14-15 GMO goals, and then the performance review of the general manager is scheduled for July 6th.
Okay, thanks.
So you have a whole month.
Oh, I'm thinking about it.
Okay. Next item is a general discussion opportunity for board members to ask questions, clarifications, provide information to staff. Are there any general discussion topics anyone wants to bring up? Okay, not hearing any, our next item is to go into closed session where we will discuss the personnel annual performance reviews pursuant to Government Code 54597.6. So I thank you all for attending and
Here's
ask
a
everyone.
video that you might be interested in. And Bob, could you call us back in 5 minutes?
Will do, sir.
Okay, I'm going to show this video real quickly.